Before we get started today, I want to make sure we remember how to go from a mixed number to an improper fraction. So if I had 5 2/3, that's what we considered a mixed number because it has a whole number and the fraction piece. To go to an improper fraction, I call it a cartwheel. I'm going to start at the bottom and I go to the top to add. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 5 to get 15 and then add the 2. So I have 17/3. And that's considered an improper fraction because the numerator is greater than the denominator. So I want you to try one on your own before we start in with our addition and subtraction. So if I had 3 5/7, what would that equal as an improper fraction? All right, good job. I got 26/7. All right, over here under example 1, we're going to add mixed numbers and make sure they're in simplest form. So in the graphic organizer that we're using in class, these are explained in more detail. This is just a kind of a checklist to make sure I'm doing everything I need to do. So first thing, make improper, find the least common denominator. We're going to add the numerators, keep the denominator the same, and then simplify. All right, let's find our first problem. Okay, let's get started. We have 6 1/6 plus 5 3/10. Now I'm asking you to make them improper first because that's what we're going to have to do when we start dealing with negative fractions. So we're going to go ahead and practice that process now. So we're going to make this improper, get 37/6 plus, do the cartwheel again, we have 53/10. So the first thing I needed to do was make them improper. On this one, I do not have a common denominator. I have 6 and I have 10. I could use 60, but that would not be the least common denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and use 30. So I'm going to use 30 for my denominator. So how do I get from 6 to 30? You multiply by 5. And then to go from 10 to 30, you multiply by 3 on the numerator and the denominator. So off to the side, I multiplied those out. Things that you don't have memorized, work off to the side, not in the middle of your problem. So 37 times 5 was 185. 53 times 3 is 159. So now I have a least common denominator, and now I'm ready to add my numerators. So I add the 185 plus 159. So adding that off to the side, we get 344. So we add our numerators. Now we're ready for the denominator. We went through all that work to get our denominator. We don't want to lose it. So we have 30 in our denominator. Now we have a pretty ugly problem here because, wow, that's very improper. So we got to make it a mixed number. So what you're trying to figure out to go from an improper back to a mixed number, you got to figure out how many times 30 goes into 344. So that means we're going to divide. So a lot of times we can do this mentally, but this is a pretty big numerator. So we know it goes in there once, which is 30, and then bring down the 44, which is one more time, and take out another 30. So it's going to go in there 11 whole times with, let's see, a 4 and a 1 with 14 left over. And then our denominator doesn't change. It still stays the same. All right, and 14 and 30 are both even, so we know we can at least cut them in half. So that's going to give us 11 and 7/15. Okay, sorry for the ugly 7. All right, so that one was pretty complicated. We had to do everything that was on our checklist. So the one that you're going to try on your own, I'm going to give you common denominators so you have one less thing to worry about. So how about you try 6 1/4 plus 8 3/4. Okay, but do try practicing the improper and then adding your numerators. Okay, on your own, you found impropers, and it divided out to be a whole number because we didn't have any remainders. So good job. Okay, on the bottom we're going to subtract. So I brought down our checklist and notice the only word that is different is subtract. And if you look at your graphic organizer, it explains this in more detail. But for right now, it's just my checklist. All right, so the problem we're going to start together is 4 2/5 minus 3 1/2. Okay, so step number 1 is to make them improper. So we're going to multiply and then add our numerator. So 20 and 22 over 5 minus multiply 2 times 3 plus 1. So 6 and 7. Okay. So now I have to find the LCD, the least common denominator, because we notice I have a 2 and a 5 there. The LCD I'd like to use is 10. Alright, so to get from 2 to 10, I'd have to multiply by 5. Therefore, that's what I have to do to the 7. So 5 times 7 is 35 for my numerator. That's supposed to be a 0. And then on this side, I have to multiply both of them by 2. 5 times 2 is 10, so that's what I have to do to 22. So we end up with 44 over 10 minus 35 over 10. Okay, so I have a least common denominator. Now we're ready to subtract the numerators. So 44 minus 35. If I borrow, I take 14 minus 5 to get 9. 3 minus 3 is 0. So I end up with 9/10. And that doesn't need any simplifying. Oh, I keep the denominator, that's why it's a 10, and nothing to simplify. So that wasn't quite as ugly as our first example. Okay, on your own, I'd like you to try 8 minus 2 3/4. I will give you one little piece of advice in case you're worried about that whole number, the 8. If you ever want to make a whole number improper, all you have to do is put it over 1. Okay, so that gets you going. Good luck. Alright, on your own, hopefully you came up with 5 1/4. That's what my workspace looked like. Alright, let's read through our U-Pick question. The liquid ingredients in a recipe are water and olive oil. The recipe calls for 3 1/2 cups of water and 1/8 cup of olive oil. How many cups of liquid ingredients are included in the recipe? So understanding means to repeat the question, and it says how many cups total are in your recipe. So I want you to tell me, pick a strategy. Are we going to add or subtract? Alright, if you chose to add, that is correct. So we're going to take 3 1/2 plus 1 1/8. Okay, after adding them up, I had a common denominator of 8 to get 4 5/8, which in conclusion we had 4 5/8 liquid ingredients in the recipe. All right, good work.